Excellent. Great. Well, listen, you know what? Let's get to it. Let's start with the teaching. And guys, you are my expert baseball people. So I'm teaching you about what's happening and want to teach from these photos. So if there's something you don't understand, I need you to ask, because you are representing all the pitchers and all the coaches out there and everyone listening to this podcast. So, of course, my intent is to be clear. Okay, guys, so I want you to go to the email I sent you with all the photos, and I want you to open up photo number 1 called Internal to External Rotation. Tell me when you've got it open.
Open.
Okay, so the first thing I want everyone to learn is you have to know this language. So this is just an action at the shoulder joint, and it happens to be the action of what the shoulder does in pitching. There's 3 frames here. On the far left frame, Joe is in what we call internal rotation. And I had him internally rotate to the exact angle that we want the arm when the front foot touches down. So this is the early cocking position. It's also internal rotation. I want you to start being able to look at his shoulder itself. And he's got, of course, the seam of his shirt. But if you can see, it almost has a roundedness to it. And when you go to the middle frame, you can see that that roundedness changed position. And now his arm is vertical and pointing straight to the sky. The reason why I want you to start seeing the shoulder, and I want you to understand something important, is it's called a ball and socket joint for a reason. And the ball is actually turning. So it's turning backward in the middle photo from the first position. In the third frame, you can see the roundness of his arm. You see how that changed? That changed because he's in external rotation. So the ball is turning as the arm turns. Now, I want everyone to understand something right now. The forearm is changing its position because the shoulder rotation occurred. You have to think of that arm in the first photo. Look at that arm. Think of it as one piece, and it sits right into the socket, which is where the seam of his shirt is. For me to know what his shoulder's doing, all I have to do is look at the angle of his forearm. The forearm itself doesn't do anything. Don't get it confused with the elbow. Okay? The elbow lengthens the arm and makes it short. That's all it does. So in the middle photo, if Joe just lengthened his arm to the side, that's his elbow doing that. So don't get confused. So there's nothing about the elbow we're talking about here right now, even though we're talking about leading with the elbow. Leading with the elbow is a shoulder issue. That's why I want you to understand the shoulder, and I want you to be able to see the shoulder. And when you've got video, it's real easy to see what the shoulder's doing. So in the first photo, notice the roundness is sort of towards us. In the second, you can see it getting to the top of his shoulder. And in the third frame, it rotates backwards. So that's what we have as internal and external rotation. And this motion here is critical to accelerating the ball. Okay, guys, close that photo down. And for everybody, let's go to the second photo. And it's called pre-stretch for acceleration. Everybody got it?
Got it.
Got it.
Okay, so in a normal accelerating position, you want the shoulder pre-stretched before you come forward. And this is what a pre-stretched shoulder looks like from the side and from the front. And now also remember, everyone, that, you know, when Joe's pitching, he has tremendous external rotation. He's doing a static, just standing there kind of thing. But you can see that he's got external rotation. You also can see, especially in the second frame, you can see that when you look at his shirt, and this is a simple way to see it, you can see he doesn't have any wrinkles between the chest and the arm. You see his chest muscle is completely stretched in a diagonal. And by the way, that chest muscle inserts on the upper arm. So you're seeing a complete stretch there, which is something I'm going to be showing you because you won't see it when he's leading with the elbow. On the first frame, when you see him from the side, you can see the tremendous stretch. And also notice, you can see his face. And also notice his arm is at a 90-degree angle, meaning the angle between the upper arm and the body. Now, I have to teach you something here about the physiology of a contraction, you know that in every sport, so let's take hitting. The bat isn't halfway through the swing, just standing there, and then the ball comes and he swings it. He goes in the opposite direction of which he's going to hit the ball. So he's pre-stretching his rotation, and then he swings through. Tennis player brings the racket way behind them and then goes forward. The shoulder has to go far behind itself. The shoulder has to pre-stretch so that it can accelerate. So if the pre-stretch doesn't occur prior to acceleration, you're not going to have a muscle that actually can explode as much as you want. Now, the rule about pre-stretching a muscle is you have to pre-stretch it and then you have to contract it. You can't pre-stretch it, kind of drop your arm in a different position, lose it, and then try to regain it again. So if you look at his shoulder in the second frame, you'll see that that's the way the shoulder kind of looks if you've ever been standing over someone doing a dumbbell fly for their chest. It's completely stretched. And from that position, you have to then do the opposite action to get the power. So he's actually in full stretch of the internal rotators so that his next movement can be to explode with the shoulder forward to accelerate the ball. That's why this position is so critical, and it is where the flaw of leading with the elbow occurs. Do you guys have any questions on this?
No, I'm straight. I'm good right now. It's good.
Joe, you got it?
Yeah, you're explaining it really well.
Okay, so let's go to photo number 3. Okay, so now here's where the difference is. So on this photo here, what you're seeing is the one you saw before, first frame. That is a pre-stretch to the shoulder joint. What you notice on the second one is you're not seeing him pre-stretched at all. He actually has started to bring his elbow forward. He lost the stretch in the shoulder. And I have photos that will depict where this happened. But when you're trying to identify a pitcher's flaw, if he has this, you're somebody who's seeing what you said, Larry. The ball looks funny. It looks like it's being carried. It looks strange. Well, this is exactly the look right here. And Joe, can you see how when you look at your right shoulder blade, how it's forward?
Yeah.
It's actually rounded. You can't see any what we call retraction, meaning the blades aren't together. This action right here is where the pitcher lets go of all the stretching that he did. And he does that stretching during the rotation phase. When he arrives to throw the ball, he needs to look like the frame on the left. When he's on the right, he's lost all the work of the pre-stretch. And right now, the only joint that's going to be able to do anything is the elbow joint. And just to quantify this, the shoulder is the fastest accelerating joint. You know what? With current research, who knows what they're finding? But I'm just going to say, let's say around 8,000 degrees per second. The elbow goes around max 4,000. So you don't want to be using your elbow to deliver the ball. You want the shoulder to deliver forces that can get transferred to the elbow and then to the wrist. You do not want to lose what you have built up in the shoulder. So let's go ahead and open up the next photo number 4. You guys got it?
Got it.
Yep.
Okay. So now this is what this looks like from the front. So there's a few things I want you to notice. First of all, notice his on the right side, which is the leading with the elbow frame. Just look at his shirt, how it just started to get into just a normal hanging looking position. That is what it looks like when you lose a stretch. So look over to the left and look at that stretch through his shoulder. So do you see how all the work that he developed rotating to stretch the front, how he completely let it go in the right-handed frame? Do you guys see that?
Absolutely.
And then also, Joe, look at how, and I know you're only depicting this, but I also know you're depicting it from memory because you know how it feels.
Mm-hmm.
See how your arm dropped lower?
Yeah. Yep.
And now, guys, I want you to notice something. Notice that the ball in the hand has completely changed its position.
Yeah, he's not behind the ball anymore.
He's not behind it, and it looks odd. And also, I want you to notice that the ball is not directly in line with his elbow. Okay. The ball is closer to Joe's head on the right than it is on the left.
I felt the bicep when I did that, yeah.
Yes, because the bicep's controlling the angle of the upper arm to the forearm.
Yeah.
And in the left-handed photo, you're seeing a pure 90 degrees. I want you to notice on the left, you're seeing a really great 90-90. 90 degrees of an angle between the forearm and the bicep, the upper arm. And notice the 90-degree angle depicted very well by the seams on his shirt between his upper arm and his body. Now, what do we have in that position on the left? We've got the perfect position for acceleration. The shoulders being stretched. The arm has to be at 90. Why do we want it at 90? Because the ball that's sitting in the shoulder joint is like a golf ball sitting on a tee if you turn the whole thing sideways. That ball spins very nicely when it's at 90 degrees. If it gets low, like on the one on the right, you cannot rotate the same way. So on this photo here, what you're seeing is the ball is not really ready for acceleration. He's going to have no choice but to continue moving that elbow forward. Pitchers have an innate sense of when that ball is ready to accelerate, and they will do whatever they have to do to line it up. And I'm going to show you that again on a different photo. So now these are the two different positions that you'll see between a pitcher that has not gone into leading with the elbow. And Joe will not need to lead with the elbow if he's in the position on the left, because now he's all stretched and he's ready to go. The guy on the right, he's already got a problem and he's already committed to having an improper shoulder acceleration. Okay, let's close that down. And let's go to the why and the how of this. So we're getting now down to putting the frosting on the cake here. So when a pitcher finds himself, so look on the left here, because this is the most critical thing. This is the genius of the body, by the way. So a pitcher who's doing this, he's trying to compensate and resolve for something. That's why I love this photo here. So here's Joe. He's rotated. And I want you to notice his shoulders are square to the plate. And his arm is just coming into squareness, but notice where the ball is at. So the ball is not ready to go. So now Joe has a problem. He's got to get the ball to be directly in line with his elbow joint, somewhere straight to the plate, so he can throw the ball. If he throws it from the position on the left, well, that's going to look ridiculous, right? So the body knows on the left frame, I'm in trouble. So in the middle frame, he starts to resolve it. Notice that we're seeing his arm dropped because he brought the elbow forward. And notice how it is doing its job. See how the forearm now is getting further away from his head? And now in the third frame, he had to drop his arm more. His elbow now and his hand are in line. But look what he had to do. And now he's ready to accelerate. The ball has got to be ready for acceleration, facing the plate for the pitcher to not do some crazy things to get it ready, unless they're going to, they're pitching in a completely different style, sidearm or whatever. But do you see how he got into trouble because he didn't get the correct position of his arm on the left?
Yeah.
He started correcting it in the middle. And Joe, remember when we were working on this, and this is an issue of the elbow working correctly to lengthen the arm correctly during rotation. So one of the reasons pitchers lead with the elbow is they just let their forearm fall onto their upper arm. Joe, how was this? First of all, this is amazing, right? When you see this?
Yeah, it's exactly what you're saying. The body just knows it has to get to 90 at some point to release the ball, so it just takes longer to get there.
Exactly. The ball has got to be ready to deliver, and pitchers will do whatever. And they don't know they're doing this. They just know, okay, the ball's not right. When you see a pitcher that over rotates, so if Joe were completely over rotating his body towards his left, that's another way pitchers will somehow try to accommodate a ball that didn't get to the acceleration path. The beginning of the acceleration path looks like, where the ball is in the third frame here, that's the beginning of the acceleration path. Every pitcher knows he's got to get to the beginning of it. In the correct photos where he's got to stretch, he's in that and whoa, he's there. And now he goes forward and the muscle that's pre-stretched already knows, okay, I'm on now. It's my turn. But if that ball's not in position, he creatively changes the shoulder to get the ball in position. And now in the third frame, he's at the beginning of the acceleration path. It's just that he's going to accelerate from the back of his elbow and not from his shoulder, because the shoulder lost the pre-stretch. Remember I said when I was talking about it, you can't grab it in the middle. Does that make sense, Larry?
Absolutely. Is this a timing thing? Could this timing issue cause this? Because
Yep.
you think you're in a position maybe to get stretched to let go of the ball, but then if your hand and forearm aren't lined up, then you're going to lead or you're going to pull with your elbow to get your ball and forearm lined up to accelerate. Does that make sense? Is that
no? It's totally. Timing is absolutely part of the problem. Joe, weren't we dealing with also with Joe, we had a few issues that we felt needed to be corrected. I work from the cause on up, but we knew we were going to have to change the actual shoulder. But Joe, weren't we working with your rotation, which was a little delayed?
Yeah, when the ball got too close to my head, like it is here, the timing to get the ball out to acceleration was off.
Yes, exactly. And, I want to remind everyone when we're showing still shots and also when we have that shot of where the pitcher's at his perfect max external rotation position, the body is rotating and at that specific moment, it looks like that, but it keeps on going into acceleration. We don't have a pitcher that turns, stops, and then throws. If the rotation doesn't occur correctly, then the arm will not arrive correctly. Once the pitcher feels his trunk and everything is forward, he's like, whoa, where's the ball? And then he's going to do what it takes, over-rotate his body. See, what's really happening is the pitcher's giving himself an extra moment to get the ball into place. And Larry, that's what you're talking about. This can be timing of his rotation. It can be timing of the elbow moving the forearm out because he let the forearm fall in. So I want everyone to look at the photo on the left. That position there, that forearm on some guys is laying down so far that you don't even see the ball. It's behind the pitcher's head. Now, he cannot, from that position, get everything in position by the time he rotates. So now you've got a timing with the elbow, but you also have a problem with the collapse of the arm onto the arm. The collapse of the lower arm onto the upper arm during rotation. So yes, Larry, timing. I would say as a troubleshooter, probably 80% of issues are timing problems. They're timing with the knee lift, timing with the stride, timing with the upper and lower together, timing of the rotation, timing of when the pitcher decides to move his elbow. So in the picture on the far left, Joe had a delay in getting his forearm in line to accelerate. His elbow joint had a delayed extension. And so by fixing the rotation and then him adding a little extra to the elbow joint, he was able to eventually get into a pure 90 position. So this is what leading with the elbow looks like. And open up the last photo because all of this ends up in, look at the difference in the hand. So the far left is what happens when you come through the shoulder and accelerate forward. And the one on the right, and by the way, it's the same video, the one on the right produced this. And that to me is insane.
So the left is the good pre-stretch 90-90, and the right is when the elbow leads. Yeah.
Yes, and you can see how the fingers are on the side.
Yeah, and that's what it feels like. That's why I have more life on the ball on the left.
Yes. And, and in this photo, and you can see how he looks, his arm has really dropped down. And of course, again, we're doing still shots. And Joe is, because of his working on this, he understands this so intimately that he was able to get into position of each one of these things. But the deal is, look how low his arm was. And if he were moving, if he were actually pitching, all of this would be exaggerated. The issue on the right, the leading with the elbow, you would see more of a dropped arm. You might see more of an odd position of the hand against the ball. What do you think of this one, Larry?
That's exactly what Joe explained he was feeling. He was feeling his ball didn't have any finish or any life at the end, and it's not when you're coming around the ball and not staying behind the ball, or, in some cases it feels like you're over the ball, so you have some leverage, and that explains what he was feeling when he was leading, with his elbow, and that's huge.
Exactly.
Yeah, because you can spin the ball well on the right. It just isn't the correct spin.
Mm-hmm. Especially for the stuff that they're measuring that you're going to need now with ride and
yeah, exactly.
The vertical break and all the things that are going to be attractive to be productive and to help you move on. So absolutely, no doubt, that's good stuff.
So for everyone, coaches, what I'm hoping the intent of this podcast was to help you identify that this is going on. Now, in terms of injuries, so this is actually leading with the elbow, even though elbow is in the title, it is actually an improper shoulder mechanics issue, as you saw in the photos where we saw a stretch shoulder and a not stretch shoulder. The body fires what it feels you stretching. It's actually how, when you go to sit down in a chair, it knows you're sitting down. I mean, the body is unbelievable. It's taking its messages from the spindles inside the muscle. There's so much communication going on. If the shoulder lets go, the brain doesn't know you're going to need to fire the muscle. So Joe, whose velocity had dropped, was still at times throwing 89, 90 with these mechanics. In high school, before he actually fell into being totally like this, he was at 95. So the deal is, you stop using the accelerators, but these pitchers, so Joe's velocity is dropping. He can't figure out why. So, of course, he's going to try throwing harder. So whatever he's doing to compensate for an improper position, he's going to do more. And because Joe trains all year, he's got such a sturdy body, he has not been injured. But a pitcher doing this will become injured. He'll become injured in the shoulder, or he'll become sore or injured in the back of the elbow. So one of the things about leading with the elbow is the force is on the medial side, the middle. So when your palm is up, it would be the side towards the inside of your body. It's where everybody hurts when they get a UCL injury. The back of the elbow by the tricep will start getting sore. And that's when we know he's possibly leading with the elbow, meaning that forearm's delivering the ball. The elbow joint is throwing the forearm forward through the use of the tricep. And so back of the elbow issues is a telltale sign. Front of the shoulder is another telltale sign. Also, know this, any pitcher you have that you're looking at saying, well, you know what? He's throwing 89 miles an hour and he hits his spots. His velocity's not going up, but boy, can he hit a spot. Well, you're kind of throwing darts. So yes, you can still have location with this style, but if you're trying to have any velocity happen, if you're trying to have a pitcher reach his velocity potential, it cannot happen because, as I stated before, mathematically, the elbow just can't rotate as fast as the shoulder. So you're removing the biggest engine from the mix. So I always say, and I say this to you, Joe, hats off to you for how well you still did, even though you weren't using your shoulder. And it's why the minute I think this started to happen, did you start to feel the power coming back to your arm?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
How was it the first time you used your shoulder correctly? Did you get sore, more fatigued? Could you tell you had used new tissue?
It wasn't as sore, I wouldn't say. It just felt awkward at first. I felt like I was like way on top of the ball, but that's where you want to be.
Exactly. Yeah, it's a completely different effect on the release point. So, Coach, any questions?
Yes, I do. Of course I do. You understand how mechanically, it's a shoulder issue as opposed to an elbow issue, but is there something mechanically that leads to this more often than not?
Yeah, the biggest cause of this is when a pitcher strides out and he steps across his body. So a right-handed pitcher will land with his left leg too far to his right. He tries to turn his hips and he can't rotate his hips square. So everybody who doesn't believe me, when you're not driving and you're on the ground, stand like you're on a tightrope and try to you turn your back hip to become square. At some point you get stuck. So then your trunk has to get ahead of your hips. You never want your arm ahead of your hips. Your arm gets ahead of your hips because your hip had to stop. And when it stops, the trunk can't rotate. So then there goes the arm, which isn't going to stop. And it ends up in a place where the body got square because it went ahead of the hips, but the arm isn't ready. So he has to keep turning. This is the telltale sign. The pitcher will have to lift his back leg off the ground while he's rotating. And the arm is more stable for him when he drops it and leads with the elbow. It's actually a correction to being out of balance during the stride. So, stepping across the body, number one cause.
That's kind of weird. I mean, I see a lot of pitchers, and that's, I don't know of anybody, like I've seen Joe pitch on TV, and I think at first glance, people would say Joe lands too open, but he actually lands, it's ideal where you'd want to, so your hips can get square. I mean, but because we've seen so many people, I'd say like 95% of the kids I see land closed, but
exactly.
I don't see as many of them leading with the elbow. But when they get probably too closed, or when it's more extreme, would you say when it's more in more extreme cases, then you'd see a guy leading with the elbow more? Or how about this? Is it possible to land too closed and not lead with your elbow? You know what I mean?
They would have to have a very strong front leg. They would have to pull the back leg off during rotation so the hips don't see, your rotation goes, you square up with the pelvis, the trunk, lower trunk, upper trunk. Okay. And that gets the arm ready. If your hips stop, the other pieces get to where they're going too fast. So now you've got an arm that's not ready. Okay. And so, yes. And also there's some degrees to the right or left that you could land. But, I had this argument I've been interviewed on it a million times, because the way we walk, the way we run is with our feet under our hips. When you stride out, when you're facing forward and your back foot is still on the rubber, you should have the space between your hips and legs like you do when you walk. This is why we're able to do it all day long, and it's not a problem. This notion of too close. Now, Joe may look like he's flying open more because of the way he rotates or this or that. I can see how it could be seen that way, but he's got a perfect landing. And Joe, when you tried to cross over the body, when you tried to land further in another direction, because one of the things I've always said to Joe, listen, if you think something is going to help you, do it. If you have an idea, don't be afraid to do it. You don't owe me like, oh, Angel says you have to land here. Joe, did it ever help you to land across your body?
No, not once.
Yeah, because he's too big and he can't get away with it. And plus, he wasn't going to give up his back foot for stability.
I was just going to say, like she said earlier, that my hip got stuck. I couldn't fully get my hips going all the way.
And because of it, one of the weaknesses that we had to work with right away is we had to work with the back hip. Once we got his stride fixed again, his hip didn't know how to fully rotate, his right hip. He didn't know how to get square with it. His arm kept getting ahead of his right hip. So he wasn't separating. The separation of the rotation levels is critical to velocity, and it's critical to the arm arriving at one time. If the hips can't rotate, that timing gets thrown off. Now, this is science, and I think everyone needs to remember when I speak, it's stuff I know from research. This isn't me making things up. The body has to rotate in 3 segments and it has to be separated. When you change that timing, you're going to change the arm arrival, because we're talking arm arrival. And again, Larry, we're talking timing. So we had to work with his back hip, because now on a muscular level, he didn't have the muscles to be able to fully rotate his hip. You cannot believe what we had to do with that back leg to get it to start working again. So another reason, Larry, when the body is rotating and the arm comes in a little bit during rotation, in other words, bringing the ball near the head, that's a normal thing that happens because of the way the bones are configured. There has to be a little bit of an angle that happens, but what happens is guys don't control that angle. They're not controlling the angle. The forearm just falls down onto the upper arm, and then they just can't get it going again to get into that position where we have that 90-90 look at max external rotation.
Good stuff.
Yeah. So, Joe, what do you think seeing these photos? It's amazing, right?
Yeah. It really clicked for me yesterday, so I think I'm good to go.
Yeah. So having it on a feel level, but then also seeing it scary.
Yeah, exactly.
Scary when you see it. Yeah. So thank you so much for giving us your feedback on this. And Larry, do you have any more questions?
I don't know if you can quantify. How much more does it put you at risk to hurt yourself?
Well, here's the good news. The good news, and I said this to Joe, thank God your velocity started dropping. See, here's the feedback system of the body. If you start doing something that's weird, something that is not supposed to be done a certain way, the joints sometimes will have a protective mechanism to slow you down. It's why when we hurt ourselves, all of a sudden we go, oh, I kind of hurt my back, it's sore. Next day, you're having spasms. Why are you having spasms? Because you didn't listen. The body said, hey, you hurt me, you're sore, chill for a while. You don't listen. The body starts spasms to stop you in your tracks. That's actually a protective mechanism, because if you kept on going, you could maybe blow out your back. When the body in the pitching motion starts doing something really strange, your velocity usually suffers. And when you start to see a good pitcher go bad, you start to see him drop in velocity, all of a sudden he can't locate, and then you look at him, he looks weird. You're going to get that drop most of the time. So now he's offsetting the weird mechanics. Now, here's the problem. We've got gamers on the mound. Just like Joe said, when his velocity started dropping, he started doing other things. And he did have moments where he had a rise in his velocity again. Am I right, Joe? You would go low and then go high, but he couldn't be consistent. Am I right about that?
Yeah, because I didn't know what I was changing.
He didn't know what he was doing. But in his head, because he's a gamer, like all good pitchers, he's going to get the job done, and I'm not going to let myself feel like I'm not throwing hard. And then they blow out their arm. This is the reason for so many injuries in the major leagues. Isn't so much the mechanics are any different. These guys are powerful guys. They're thinking, they're gamers. They got to get the job done. And what they're doing is pitching harder with bad mechanics. And when the velocity starts to drop, they become almost more mental. So they become at a greater risk. If the body has control, it will slow you down. If the body has its way, it's not going to let you increase your velocity. It's going to decrease it because it's not going to let you throw hard. But if you are of the mentality, and this is your job, you're going to continue to try to throw hard. You're going to find more creative ways. Your mechanics are going to get even worse. And that's how you end up getting injured. And that's the reason for that. So the injury can be offset by the fact that these mechanics are not using the shoulder, and there's no way that pitcher can have his top velocity if he doesn't use the top velocity joint, which is the shoulder joint. The shoulder is critical in internal rotation, and you're not internally rotating when you're leading with the elbow. Does that make sense?
Heck yeah. Good stuff. Absolutely. Very helpful.
Yes.